Hello hero, it's Lucy Lannon. It's good to see you. You've seen the title, so at this stage you know more about today's reading than I do, since I speak to you from the recent alternate past. This is a general, timeless one, ideally designed for quite a large audience, so we won't get as specific as we would in a private booking, link down below. If most of what I'm saying feels like an answer to a question you've been living, take those tidbits with you and let a fellow traveller excavate the rest. If it's not your reading, there are playlists on my channel hub to randomise finding something else. Whilst it's true that a broken clock is right twice a day, I'm not sure that same clock is right 10 times within the hour. So trust yourself, above all, to know what's useful for you and what makes you feel more empowered for hearing it, no matter what your beliefs. While we're on beliefs, on this channel gendered terms are just a specificity of language to describe energetic tendencies and signatures, solar or lunar inclination in accordance with a hermetic law of polarity, and not any kind of socialisation to buy into wholesale or conflate with the identity or orientation of anyone described. Romantic and spiritual labels used are plucked from lengthy precedent predating any unfortunate trending controversies or engineered cyclical backlash. My dude, around these parts, we don't relinquish the complexity of our full histories. We trust ourselves cognitively to adapt what we consume and see what's healthy and long-term accurate. I'm legally obliged to say this is entertainment in quote marks and that I'm an occultist not qualified in unrelated disciplines to advise on physical and mental health, finances, legalities. You get the picture, you're in charge of you. All my readings are protected and warded by frankly magnificent beneficial forces, though I don't share my custom prep rituals on camera any more than I give out my address. I hope the reasoning behind that is obvious, but you can trust there are zero parasitic or adversarial influences permitted within 100 unseen paces of any signal we patch from the noise here today. So sit back, relax into the shape of your most luminous possible future self, cozy up to imaginal allies, and take in whatever it is you need to hear. If you do like it, this small channel with a big mission very much appreciates subscriptions, thoughtful comments, or donations in order to spread the word and keep the lights on. Now, let's tune that dial. Okay, so there's a few things going on today, gang. Firstly, I should say, I'm sorry it's been a few days since the last upload. I had some personal stuff to take care of, but we're back in the game, so hopefully this one will be useful to many of you. If you're seeing this card in particular, don't worry if that's not possible for you biologically or it's not something you're aiming at. It has a more representational meaning as well. I just use these DIY cards to get a bit more colloquial with meanings. Okay, first thing to say is that this did not go to plan. The divination method for today, the spicy optional that we've been doing for the last couple of months, is actually going to be a repeat version of something we've already used to divine. So there may be a theme of looping back, or there may be just a kind of needing to do something impromptu because of the resources available. Because, as you can probably see, there's roses on the table and petals in abundance, and I feel I should use these for divination kind of before they dry off. So we're going to do that this time, and then next time we'll go back to using a different form of divination each time we do a read that you haven't seen before. So hopefully you're all right with that. The next thing to say is about your crystals. So we had a celestite, a green fluorite, which looks white in this light, but I promise you it's green, and then a quartz crystal. These don't have that much in common as stones. You may have found one in particular that suits your vibe, and I urge you to look at whichever one that is. But the one common thread they do have is a kind of air element energy, a need for clarification, a need for intellectual objectivity, perhaps a process of being objective about very non-objective things, or being analytical in terms of communications. And this is echoed by the fact that normally I have big chunky my amethyst, which some of you will remember from the early days, sort of round here, to mark where you guys can see and where I am on the table. This time I've got my jade, which tends to mean that there's some kind of compassion or compassionate communication required. It's like this jade in particular is a need to be sensitive about an issue whilst getting it across. So I'm not sure if that's for me because this is the border and the barrier, or if it's more to do with you guys. Hold up. All right, so here's the thing, right? We were interrupted just then by an interruption I knew was going to happen because I was expecting a delivery. We were also interrupted by the anticipation of an interruption. My feeling on this, because I do read everything, including the times that the reading is put on pause, right, is that there is a process here of perhaps self-transformation, because we've got the journey of the sun as the kind of soul's journey, and then Pluto in the reverse, flippity-dippity, kind of clogging things up a little bit in terms of the universal sync. So there's something that kind of got in the way of what a person involved here, maybe you, feels was their overall mission or journey, or particularly journey to purpose, something like that, right? And then also, because of that major interruption, there have been further, more minor interruptions because of the anticipation of something like that happening again. So, for example, if you are astrologically minded and you had a particularly tumultuous Saturn return, hello, hi, same, I had a stroke and various other things, you may have then experienced other life changes that were actually kind of part of your path, part of your karma in the broad sense, right? But looked like they could be more of a crisis than perhaps they were, or looked like they had the potentiality to be catastrophic. And therefore those things became actually bigger events than they were going to be, because you kind of tried to drive around them. Does that make any kind of sense? That's what is coming through with all this Pluto and everything. The other thing that I should say before we really dive in is that we didn't pick out a colour card for you, and because it's my DIY deck, I pretty much always do it, and it's quite an important thing for me, so it's unusual that we didn't. Now, in this same week, I've finished a Murakami book called Colourless. I think it's Tsuzuru Tazaki. I'm really bad at pronunciation and memory, so apologies to anybody offended by that. Please put how you say it and what it is in the comments. But it's kind of a mystery novel, very meandering, very Murakami, right? Very sort of intelligently written with sensitivities to individual characters that rely on nuance and not on narrative form. It's not a straightforward story. It doesn't really go anywhere, but it's kind of about the journey in that sense that he's very good at. And within that book, the reason it's called Colourless is because it's about a guy who has 4 friends who are all named in their family name after a different colour. And he is the one who is colourless. And then at some point in his kind of late childhood, his late teens time, these people cut him off altogether without explanation. They completely reject him. And he's left to go off to Tokyo to pursue a dream that he had, kind of without any contact from them, without any information from them, any indication as to what might have happened there, or why it is that the closest relationships of his life so far are suddenly rendered meaningless overnight. And he goes into a deep depression, and the book is kind of his journey from that into the future and into, almost a couple of decades later, where someone important to him says, hey, have you thought about maybe going back and tracing that and seeing what really did happen? Now, colourless because he doesn't have a colour in that friendship group, but also colourless because as a person he feels that he's lacking something that these other figures have, or indeed that the figures in his present and maybe his future have. He encounters other people along the way who have a colour, or who speak very eloquently about other people's colours in the auric sense and in the sense of just having something about you, right? So it's also a book about finding yourself, about sexuality, all kinds of different things, but about finding what one's colour is, or what one's place in the world could be, when you're a person who feels that you don't have a particular distinguishing quality. So again, there's someone in this who might feel like that, who might feel that they've kind of meandered from thing to thing. They've been very good in all the roles that they've had. They've made friends. They've been, financially functional in various places, like the guy in the book. But there's something missing in sort of a definitive idea of who they are or what they might become, or a direction that other people seem to have from an earlier age group, right? There's also something in there potentially about being ghosted, and about that being one of the catastrophic movements of plutonic stuff, or it being one of the kind of false alarm things that came after a big crisis that then made this person go, no, I'm gonna go a different way here because I don't want to encounter something as catastrophic as before. So, excuse me. Sorry if I'm sounding a little hoarse. Horses may be relevant. We're going to go unusually to the Black Moon astrology book, just because I want to read some of the stuff about Pluto for anybody who's not particularly astrologically minded. So spirit is accurate for Sun. If we call this like the soul's journey, the hero's journey, this refers maybe to like, if we're talking about that particular Murakami character, and you don't have to have read the novel for that to be relevant, just take what I said, right? Then the sun would represent the novelization of his journey, of his life, of his maturation into a kind of coagulated personality from all these different sporadic elements, right? Pluto, however, and 11 in the reverse, so 1111 may be relevant. I may even tag it. Pluto card in brief. These are some of the keywords, so let me know in the comments what hits. We have destruction, creation, regeneration, passing away of the old and bringing in the new, people you know passing away, funeral homes, mortuaries, hospitals, sewers, latrines, bathrooms, dumps, graveyards, that which has been buried in the psyche or otherwise, decay, hidden or unseen things, ghosts, ghosted, right? Spirits, dark entities, hauntings, the occult, dark magic, sorcery, tunnels, the underground, vampirism, goth culture, weather, the genitals, procreative systems, and therefore sexualities, right? And that's relevant for the book reference as well. The lower colon, crossroads, divorce, changes in finance, the culling back of non-essentials in life, read kind of KonMari type stuff, but spiritually. A twisted outlook, profound rebellion, the colours black, purple and maroon. And again, we have a lot of that going on here, don't we? I'm fairly sure that Pixel Occult in designing the Neon Moon deck was aware of the plutonic colours, but I think it's also a nice little nod. It's very neat, right? So there is this transformation theme, but there is also all of these individual things which could hit into it. All of these little moments which could have provided that first plutonic hit. And then these kind of, I want to call them aftershocks, these echoes. You may be in a place actually which is having, now I'm hearing earthquake weather, the song, right? So it may be that you are in an area prone to earthquakes, or that there is a kind of, excuse me, hiccups, that's my confirmation. There is a kind of aftershock quality to the things that have happened to you, or indeed to this person we're discussing, after this giant plutonic point of crisis. With it being backwards as well. I mean, I know in the last reading we did speak about this a little bit, but we're talking retrogrades, right? And I know Pluto doesn't retrograde kind of very often, and when it does, it's a huge global thing. Those of you into mundane astrology, you can get deeper into that with your personal interpretation, but what I will say here, that I said in the last reading, I think, was that retrogrades are spend more time with me, look at me in detail. It's an illusion actually caused by the way that we move, and not by a planet literally going backwards in its orbit, right? It's to do with the way that we chart things, the way that we see things from Earth. So it's very much a period of introspection and reflection regarding a particular force that is to do with our perspective more than it's to do with the actual movement of that celestial body. So if we're talking about transformative kind of crises, or elements of very stark sexuality, or, you know, deaths, rebirths, all the things we mentioned, we're also speaking about a time, possibly now, where there's an interruption in the overall mission to actually sit with that, to be in communion with it, to have compassion for it with this aforementioned jade, and to be objective about it, to be analytical about it, to be distanced enough from perhaps the shadow of the tower or the crisis to really contemplate what it is that it means. The image I'm getting in my head for that, which is quite Plutonic, is the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where he's in the bed and he's staring at the obelisk, and it's kind of all, if you've read the novelization, the Arthur C. Clarke thing, you kind of know that all of what's just happened on screen, which is very abstract in the movie, is kind of descending on the awareness of this person in a way that we'll see whether humanity can take that level of knowledge or can transmute it, transform it into something else, alchemically speaking. So there is almost a period here of you kind of laid on your back, like staring at this thing, or whoever this is for, be it you or someone close to you, and kind of taking in the information of the obelisk, right? The enormity of what happened, but also the scope of what it can teach you when you're not emotionally in the mire of it, when you're not kind of in the mud with it, in the trenches with it, right? So, I know that's a lot to begin with, right? And then we're going to get in further. I want to talk about the fact that we've got a Mandalorian deck and we've got Gemini, King of the Air, right? I can't remember the name of this guy, isn't it? Is it Clancy Brown or someone that plays him in the first or second season? Anyway, great character. He's a bit nefarious, he is a smuggler, he's a bit shady. That is a general Gemini trickster energy. This isn't offence to my Geminis, I have Gemini in my chart, as many of us do. But it's slippery, right? It's a slippery little fish. It's something not quite fully trustworthy, but for the good and the growth of all. It's a figure who's kind of passing through in a way that will be transformative. So again, there is that Plutonic echo, even though Gemini isn't associated with Pluto. And we have another echo here in that I chose for this card to be Gemini because of the way that I signify my court cards, which I understand is not universal. And we have the Gemini symbol here, and then we have this 11 that looks pretty much like it, yeah? So there is an extension of this energy that is almost embodied in a person, whether that is you or whether that's someone you were close to at that time, someone that indeed ghosted you, or someone that had a particularly influential relationship to any of the things that we discussed there. And I'm trying to keep it general because this is for a large audience. Please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. So if you want to get more specific, the best thing to do is book with me, but we are just talking generally about these Plutonic transformations and about a figure in your life that is part of the aftershock, part of the echo of this transformation. Now, that can mean a couple of things, ever appropriate for the symbology of the twins, right? With our first twin, we have somebody who might echo this in the sense that they were directly involved in it. So if there was someone that passed away or a friendship group that disbanded or something like that, this would be someone directly tied to that event, to that person, to that grouping, to that place and time. In the same way that, to use the Murakami example, we might be speaking in that sense about one of the friends who had a particular colour, right? The friend, I think it's Aries, is it? The friend who was the colour black anyway might be particularly relevant if you have read that because it's Pluto. On the kind of other potential for this Gemini twin figure that's associated with this, we have somebody who acted as an echo in an indirect, more cosmic way. So somebody that was part of the aftershock experience, someone that turned up in your life, kind of sprouted out of the ground of what was created by this transformation. Again, I'm getting hiccups. Excuse me, apologies. Kind of as a result of where the person who went through this was put in their understanding of the world, in how it changed their trajectory, even in the kinds of things that they were afraid of happening in further aftershocks and the way that they changed direction. So, for example, if this was like the loss of a job or a marriage or something like that, then perhaps the person who lost that thing completely moved cities or went into a different relationship, a different set of friends, etc., etc. And through doing that, through kind of avoidance of further hurt in this department, or through kind of angling around that particular industry or thing, they went on another path And, you know, day one on that path, they met someone else. If you have read the novel that I was referencing at the beginning, that version of this twin might also be the guy who was grey, right? The guy who used to listen to classical music in his apartment, who he had like a strange possible sexual encounter with, right? So there's kind of, I guess I'm giving two opportunities for this because I think this figure is quite key to the kinds of communications we're going to be having as we move forward. I think if there is a dialogue between two or more people, the focal figures for it will be the person whose journey reached this plutonic crisis point, the person who is unsure of their own colour, of their own significance in the world, right? And who has been kind of further shunted off their trajectory by all of this mayhem. And then somebody that was either someone they met as a result of that, someone directly involved in it, like an ex-lover, or someone that they met as a result of avoiding those kinds of things, those kinds of circles, places, industries, etc. Again, going general, we will get more precise. So there is a kind of dialogue happening which needs compassion, which needs objectivity, which needs a keen mind. This dialogue is both with the force of Pluto and how it changed everybody's trajectories and perspectives, but it's also with this person who was plutonically oriented, perhaps even more comfortable within this crisis than the person we're speaking about, and who has a lot to do with it, and indeed a lot to do with the direction that we will now move in, having come to come to an understanding of what this was. It's kind of no coincidence that my language is altering here and that I'm struggling to get words out. There is something here about, this isn't in the cards yet, right? But there's a broader sense here about struggling to express oneself, or struggling to know the self that needs expression enough to do that accurately. If you identify as being this person, and I'm not saying it is directly you, because it could go either way, but this sun person, right, or this person whose journey it is, there is a sense for them that they might unintentionally mirror the people around them, or they might go through various phases, various friendship groups, perhaps even various careers. And it's not because they're not passionate about those things. It's not because that's not who they are, or at least a part of who they are. It's not because under different circumstances they wouldn't listen to those tunes, dress that way, hang around with those kinds of people, move in that class system, have that kind of job, etc., etc. It's more that because they've never really felt that they've found their own personal colour, this has been the next best and easiest thing. It's been the logical step because we have these crystals that are mind-based. It's almost like at each turn of the road, at each fork in the road even, and the fork in the road reading may be relevant, that was a few weeks back, right? This person has not assessed based on a grand trajectory, a big dream, an eventual outcome in the way that a lot of us do when we're kind of born into knowing who we want to be, or we have a certain set of passions from early childhood. Instead, there is a feeling that this person has stopped at the turn and said, I need to pick a direction just for now what? And that they might have been tempted then to pick directions based on the people around them, based on avoidance of crises or aftershock, or based on the pull towards having a colour, even if that colour is not yet found, right? This is a mild spoiler for the novel I was speaking about, and please do read it if you haven't, but you kind of never get to what his colour is. You get to who he is, but he doesn't end up saying, definitively, I am green, or I am red, or, there's no kind of, this is who I have become, and that's final. There are hints towards it. There are certain references made to extremely descriptive surroundings where you could take the colours of a train car, or the colours of a love friend, or of a pool hall, or whatever, and kind of go, yeah, I think it's that. He's probably blue, or he's probably grey, or, But you don't get that definitive selection because Murakami doesn't want to end things in a definitive way. And in the same fashion, I think that this person, maybe you, maybe someone else, has not wanted to be too divinative about the future, not just because that will close off further options later on, because freedom is a really valuable thing for many people, particularly now when there's so much persuasion in the air and moving through the wires, right? The wires. But also because to be definitive halts that growth process. It halts the transformation into gradually flowering into your own colour, which might be why we had the petals, why we've got these worse for wear roses left over from my birthday. Kind of coming into the reading today, this flower imagery, it's like Pluto is very much about burning off everything in order to refertilise the earth for something genuinely new to transpire. It's very associated with the death card in the tarot, for those who know, right? And there is a sense of that bit of this being in the past, but a blossoming about to happen. And we don't yet know the colour of the flower or indeed the person. I hope this is making sense. Please confirm or hit like if it is so far. Right, so we're beginning with the Lovers reversed for our cards. And I want to just read from this wonderful guidebook that comes with this deck. Because yes, we can go to the Lovers reversed and we can go to like a difficulty making a choice and all these standardized tarot meanings. But there is extra wisdom in the fact that this is a cyberpunk deck with particular narratives. So I'm going to use it. Hope you forgive me. So we've got, why is it that the faults in this program cascade out and harm those it was meant to help? What purpose can I have when I contribute to the very issues I was meant to solve, right? In this, I don't want to say lack of direction, because it's not even that, but in this tendency towards short-lived, frequent changes of direction, which is a very Gemini mood, by the way, this person may feel that they have been part of the problem of other people lacking direction, being misdirected, or not having a steady logic to their lives. It's almost as if there is a guilt about having a lack of identity or a lack of decisiveness, which has then been sort of projected onto the other people close to this person as an imagined stagnancy in their systems, right? Like, if I had to put this into really blunt words, and I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying this might be how the person would phrase it to themselves, it's almost like because you can't make a decision, or because you're seen to make lots of frequent smaller decisions, it means that the people around you can't decide fully either, and that you've held them back, right? And again, that's not me saying that's the truth. That's me saying that it's how this person might feel about their own life so far, about their own identity, about the fact that their path has been kind of very fractured. And I think that's a really positive thing sometimes. I think that the mutability of Gemini is about taking the end of a cycle and adapting into the next thing in a very fluid way. In a very intellectual way, because Gemini is I think, right? So it's very sort of thought-provoking, philosophical, again, goes very well with the novel we mentioned. But there's something about maybe forming a path here, which was kind of about fractured elements of something larger, in a way that rubs other people up the wrong way. The unspoken vibe I'm getting from this astrological is like, astrologically, sorry, is like strong Uranus, where it's not that you don't have a decisive energy, it's that people with a more straightforward energy will see you as a threat, right? I hope it's all right to say this, but excuse me. I had a recent astrological consultation where somebody who had a lot more of a grounded energy than I do, a lot more earth, was looking at my kind of Uranian dominance and seemed to approach with concern the idea that I choose to present in a certain way which potentially alienates other people. And that is absolutely true, not just astrologically, but in just observing, you know, how I dress, how I choose to express myself, the sorts of music I club together and listen to, you know, heads up to the last couple of playlists. But my response to that was to say that my personal Uranus interacts very much with my personal Saturn and personal Chiron. So my boundaries, my restrictions, my limitations in life, but also how that relates to my own healing journey and how it is that I have a particular mission to heal others, which is something we all carry, by the way. If you haven't looked up your Chiron, it might be super useful. So I related that unpredictability, which they found threatening and sort of put into astrological language as being a bit, you know, don't you find you're alienating yourself? Very Uranian and Aquarian thing. And I saw it as an intentional alienation so as to show other people that if they feel like an alien, that's okay, right? That's healing. Or an intentional alienation to say, you don't have to do things in the straightforward way that other people are going about them. Because in fact, sometimes going in a really sort of a-traditional or what seems to other people messy path gets exactly the precise ingredients that you need to be able to pull it all together at the end and have the most societal impact and the most good to do in the world. And yes, it's a very unpredictable energy for other people. It's a very confrontational energy, right? I think for some of you, you'll have identified in the portion of Pluto where we talked about kind of goth culture and looking a bit strange, or maybe being part of alternative sexualities or BDSM scene or any of those other things that are a bit challenging to people who are outside of that private universe. It won't be for all, but it's confirmation for some, right? And what I'm tempted to say here with the sort of mood of all of this is that you're perhaps not confrontational, but what other people would deem as a confrontational approach is part of your colour, is your asset, is what actually enables you to reach the most people with the best healing for them or the best fun for them, you know? Because for many of us, like, we're not just healers, we're here to inspire people. We're here to provide people with deep love, with compassion, with thought-provoking conversation, you know? We don't have to be liked by everyone, is what I'm saying. And if you've been disliked because of the quick swerves that you've taken over the years, I feel like this particular manifestation of what you might have been thinking or what someone has been thinking, in combination with what I've been reading and doing this week, is trying to tell me to tell you that atypical is sometimes for the best, otherwise it wouldn't exist, right? Cosmically, we don't have these confrontational energies because there is a grand evil at work behind their funny outfits, right? Nor is it because, as many people will kind of propagate in a harmful way, unhealed people present in a particular fashion or listen to certain things or dress a certain way. I'm here to tell you 37 years into the phase that that's absolute bollocks, right? And as a healer who's benefited a great many people in their own words, I think it's actually beneficial sometimes to be that strange figure, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to say. When you think of your path, or you think of the path of this person, it might seem that there's a kind of never-ending story style mirror gate going on, or like a Snow Queen style mirror, where other people see their futures, they see their potentialities, their wishes, their future realities, their colours, right? And you have been working, for whatever reason, plutonic or otherwise, with what other people might deem a shattered mirror. You've been picking up shards from the ground and perhaps even cutting yourself in the process, you know, metaphorically speaking. and trying to align those things up in a way that looks like the mirror you began with to plan your route down this kind of internal yellow brick road. Those around you with intact mirrors, with particular privileges, be they in a grounded sense, able bodies, different races, different sexualities, etc., or be they in a more cosmic sense, certain chart balances that allow for a more straightforward existence, maybe a proliferation of trines, etc. Those people might side-eye your particular path of mirrors and look at their own trajectory as being quite straightforward and unintentionally, and maybe even with compassion, give you the message that because your path began from being a bit broken, you are broken. You're not. Okay? Or this person is not broken. You may resonate with a couple of the readings I've done recently for people who feel that way. Notably, there's the one with a trigger warning attached in the title fairly recently. But if that's not for you, or if you think I'm going on a bit or whatever, just know that not having a defined path in the way that other people do does not mean that you are a flawed human, a flawed spirit, a broken lover, a broken friend. It does not mean that you deserve rejection, ghosting, or abandonment, right? It also doesn't mean that in doing what you're doing, you're holding people back, because at the end of it all, my dude, they have the choice of whether to travel at your pace or whether to say, actually, this person doesn't appear to be moving in the direction I wanted to. I'm going to pick up my autonomy. I'm going to pick up my sovereignty, and I'm going to leave and go my own way. And that can be a really difficult thing to hear if, for example, you were in a broken relationship and somebody decided to stick by you for a little longer than it served them to, right? But that's not your decision. It's theirs. And with the objectivity, with the clarity of these stones, and with the huge unconscious transformational surge of all the emotion and darkness that encompasses Pluto, we can look at dynamics like that and we can say, I had a choice the entire time in this with where I moved next. And the information available to me meant that I moved in this way, and then in that way, and then in this way. But also, my counterpart, perhaps even my twin, or my friend, or my family member, or whatever it was, also had their choices to make in this. They had their own autonomy. They saw what I was doing, and they saw their own mirror, their own yellow brick road, their own journey. They knew their own colour. They had a decisive image of who they were in the world and who it was that they had wanted to be prior to whatever this confrontation was and whatever the aftershocks of it were. And they chose to go the way that they chose to go. For some of you, there is a coming to peace with that. And for a smaller number of you, and again, I resonate with this on a personal level, coming to peace with that can sometimes mean that you come to peace with a bereavement that involves other people going on tangled paths, different paths, or involves the things that you wish you would have said, or the ways that you wish you would have affirmed somebody whose path was not as straightforward as everyone else's. I totally get it, right? I lost someone mid-pandemic who very much made the best of his fractured mirrors and went all around the world with his desires and with what was not recognised at the time as healing for other people, right? He was seen as a little bit of a frivolous character, a bit of a force of fun, but not really as anything more. And he was under a lot of pressure to settle down in more precise ways, or ways that made other people around him feel a bit better. And then eventually we lost him, right? Through no fault of his own or link to that path, just out of the blue, suddenly. And unanimously, what we all wish that we told him is that the way that he was journeying through the world was an acceptable one, and that we loved him, and that we were all delighted to see him whenever we got chance between these fractured little directions that he was going down, right? He was a master healer, But he did it through partying with people and fucking around and going from place to place to place and just shrugging his shoulders and saying, I'll find what I'm meant to do later. That was what he was meant to do. And I feel the need to give that example, not just to acknowledge him and to express my gratitude for him, but to validate those of you who've maybe gone that way so far and who are being told by other people to settle down or to be more serious or to go the way that so-and-so went, or to play in alignment with these values that we all have that we're projecting onto you. It may be the Uranian in me, which is very heavy, by the way, but I say bollocks to that. I say you've gone the way you've gone, and you couldn't have become as splendid a person as you are without having a little bit of stuff off book, right? A little bit wavy gravy, bit of a serpentine path. And because of all the things that you've managed to accumulate on that kind of cosmic road trip that is this solar journey, you can now be more objective in a way that perhaps the people who went the correct way could not. So there's that coming in already. Let's move to your DIY love messages, which are not necessarily about love. We've got, I'm about to get us pregnant. Okay. For some of you, this will be literal. If you've been either expecting or expecting to expect, if you're a regular for tarot readings, you'll know what I mean with that last one, right? If you've had a couple of people saying be extra careful, or you're in a connection that you feel could go in any kind of direction, then do be mindful of that, particularly if you're not in a life place to support a youngling at the moment. For others of you, that isn't a possibility, or it isn't something that you want. And this may be, if it's not about being careful, it may be about kind of something being birthed which is completely new to you. There is a colour humming under the colourlessness that you have feared for your existence. And it is about to blossom forth, as we spoke about with all these plants growing out of this plutonic wasteland that we were in. I'm about to get us pregnant is Spirit's way of saying, I'm about to birth something here for you. I'm about to give you a brand new opportunity, or push you in the direction of something that you make, which actually provides its own solution to all of this stuff, right? Its own... A solution is the wrong word because that posits you as a problem, but its own answer to the question that has been silently placed by all of the recent events the events of recent years, shall we say, because again, reading for a broad age range. If we work together, we can overcome anything. I love how motivated and into your life you are. I actually feel this might be from this person, and for some of you, you're like laughing or groaning. This may not be someone you're on particularly good terms with because of who it is, and because it is in the suit of swords, which can be quite confrontational at best, right? That's a very sensitive way to put that. Excuse me, hiccups, confirmation again. So in the tarot, and particularly in older forms of the tarot and in the playing card decks, both swords and wands were different kinds of battle suit. So there may be, if not an overt antagonism between you and this person, there may be a kerfuffle in communication styles. You may have different love languages. There may have been a misunderstanding along the way, which came from this or the aftershocks or whatever. But I do feel with this Gemini symbol and the sort of flip of the playing cards happening, that this person has two sides to them, and that one of those sides very much respects you, very much cares about you, I dare say for many of you loves you, and hasn't expressed that because of this Lover's reverse energy projecting out. Now, we said the Lover's reversed is coming from the person whose solar journey this is, the person whose mission, whose life we're talking about, right? But also, if you project something out hard enough, you cover what is underneath that thing, right? Think of a cinema screen, which would be white in colour and then has a movie projected onto it. If that movie has a lot of darkness in it, you know, if it's a horror movie or something similar, you lose all of that white. The nature of the screen being white becomes invisible because of the projection that's put onto it. And something that Spirit is urging you to understand with a few of the motifs that we've already repeated here is that in projecting onto this person that you held them back, that you made them stagnant, that you made them diverge in their path because of the way that you were travelling on yours, or that you pulled them into the aftershocks of your own circumstances in a less than desirable way, there is a risk that you don't accurately see the nature of this person and what they actually believe about you because of the self-concept that you're projecting and pushing outwards towards them. So indeed, when we look back at this dualistic Gemini self, not only are we seeing the traditional twins and this 11-11 and all that sort of stuff, we're also seeing the reality of the person and the twin you've projected upon their face. Yeah? So what I want you to do in this period of sort of thinking about all of this and getting ready to birth something new is like pull back what you think you did to or for them, strip that away and go with the facts of kind of who they are to you. I'm now hearing the title of a short story that I read once called something like The Facts in the Case of Mr. Valdemar. It's a really niche reference. Hit me up in the comments if that's for you. But for some reason that's relevant to somebody. I think it was like an old pan horror or something. But yeah, there's something thematically going on there. I may even look into it and put it in the comments like what that's about. But there's just something there. I do believe they think they can work together with you. And I do think they love how motivated and into life you are. You know, going back to my example of the friend who passed away, we all wish we could have said these things. We all wish we could have said, you know, I love working with you. I love being around you. I love partying with you. I love how motivated and into life you are. Because even while you're taking a pathway that is a bit dangerous or is a bit unpredictable for the rest of us, it inspires all of us, right? Unanimously, it's like, not just in a standard funeral way where you all say the nicest thing that you think, but genuinely with this person, everybody that they touched, in a minor way or a major way, was inspired by the way that they just went about their day-to-day life. I'm being pushed by spirit to say something else personal here, so I think this is a reading that's going to go on for a little bit, and I'm really sorry, but something else that's come up over the last few days in my kind of journaling world is how little time I take to spend with the things that I've already worked for, right? This person, again, to reference them as a kind of mirror potentially of you or of this person, they really lived in every moment that they were moving through. And that was clear in their body language, in the bozo things that they said very much in the moment, in a direct response to everything ever. They lived in a particularly honest way, and they met every circumstance that they were in, anywhere on the globe and with all kinds of people, face to face, right? Projection free, if you like, and with a full acknowledgement of the present moment. That is something I'm realizing that I don't always do with my surroundings and with the people around me. I don't know whether any of you are like this, but I tend to fill my day-to-day task list with stuff that I believe will improve me in the long run, enough that I earn what I already have. So that may be a theme for some of you, and that might be why I'm pulled to say this. I think many of us, particularly in this modern age, and with this kind of media influences coming in from social media being ever present, etc., we kind of are always working on something, right? And it's not always just a goal in the sense of I want to see this place, I want to be successful in this area or whatever. It's also about like, and I will lose 20 pounds, and I will accumulate another language, and I will make this many friends in this amount of time in a new town. And it's all very kind of, it becomes very systematically deteriorating. Because as much as we're doing those things and as much as they do expand us as people and improve on our lives and help us to be more knowledgeable and enjoyable for other people to experience as well, there is a kind of undercurrent in that sort of, and I will do this and this and this and this, that is constantly on a hamster wheel, that is on a treadmill of fixing oneself, improving oneself in order to just live. Now, this person's skill, which they taught me and which I've been contemplating recently, is that they were just in the moment all the time. And that may be something you've been criticised for in the past if you have taken an atraditional path, shall we say. It's like, oh, well, you only ever think about the next weekend or the next few months, or you don't consider everybody's feelings in the process. You just respond in the moment to whatever you're doing. But really, that's kind of how you're an inspiration. It's kind of how us, potentially atypical people in terms of our plutonic paths and the direct choices we make, that's where our strengths lie. It's a very sort of cardinal to mutable energy, right, as opposed to fixed. And I think there's something here about allowing for that and spending more time perhaps in the moment, enjoying before you kind of switch directions again, which may be entirely appropriate for you, spending time in what you've made and really making the most of it. So if you move to a certain town and you have the feeling that you might move away again, have you made sure that everyone in that town knows how much you enjoy their company? Have you seen all the parts of the back streets of that town that might have interesting graffiti on the walls or a strange placement of windows? Have you gone to see all of the sights of that town if you're in, a historic place or a major city? Have you spent time in the sort of more countryside places of that town, just sitting, just listening to the bees buzz, just watching things go by and being in your own body? There's an odd push-pull here between somebody who is criticised for not having a linear momentum, but also who doesn't seem to spend very much time in the present in these brief journeys that they have within the overall picture. So again, this isn't from the cards, this is from everything over this end. But make sure that you are both being compassionate to yourself about the twists and turns that you've made, maybe with some regret, maybe out of some fears, whatever, it's in the past. But also that wherever you are right here, right now, you take a minute to be here right now. You open your windows and have a coffee and listen to the sound of the rain. You call up the friend that lives down the road that you don't have an excuse to see today, but you just want to see their grin, right? Again, hiccups confirmation. If you're on a particular course or you're in a particular career path which you feel may change, take the time to sit with the material, not just on an intellectual level of absorbing it, but on the level of really enjoying the nuances of what it was that you wished to learn there and what it is that you've gained, right? Be here now. For some of you, it will be uncomfortable because there is all this projection as to holding other people back or speeding them up or shoving them over this end or what will so-and-so think and what will this person say. But there is a need to be present, partly because you can't have something blossom out of this fertile ground without A, accepting that it's become fertile because of what died off, and B, without staying in the same fucking place, right? Plant a seed and keep on travelling, you won't see the seed grow. Some of you need to hear that because you're so used to moving on and moving on and moving on in this kind of dissatisfaction with not having a set trajectory, a set colour, a set way to be in the world, a set dream even, that you're kind of missing the flowering of the seeds you have planted at each stage. Perhaps for some, there's like a high fidelity style retrospective process that needs to go on, where you kind of toddle back to the last place you changed direction and you see what everybody's doing there, what they're all about, what kind of impact you had on that community. And then you toddle back a bit further and you maybe speak to this long lost friend. Do you see what I'm getting at? There's a kind of, it's almost as if like you have a fear that in never truly making a decision, you're affecting the momentum of other people. But at the same time, part of the reason your momentum is, not that it's in a different direction, but in that it's speedy, is that you won't ever kind of sit where you are. And you may come to me and you may say, that's because you lead a much more privileged life than I, and I don't have the time between work and this and that and the other to just kind of absorb my surroundings. But what I will say to you in that sense is that there is always a commute. There is always a section of a lunch hour. There is always a 2-minute period before you drift off to sleep, absolutely tuckered at the end of a long day, where you can absorb the room you're in or think about the faces you love. I think the only cop-out actually going on here is not the way you've travelled or the things you've imagined that other people feel about this and the way that's influenced your decisions, or the fact that you haven't really set your sight on something specific yet, or that you've got a couple of businesses going and that's fine too. It's that you don't ever really spend any time where you are before you make the next swerve in order to see whether you're happy with it. And what I want to say to you is that, you know, if you take anything from what we've spoken about and what we're about to speak about, it's again, sit in a window with a coffee or a tea or whatever it is that you drink, wherever you are, and just go, this is where I am in my life now. This is how it feels in my body. This is the kind of stuff I think about. These are the kinds of dreams I have at night. These are the people that I tend to see most often. These are the people I want to see most often. These are the kinds of things that happen in the environment around me that are apparently not related, but cosmically probably are feeding back, etc., etc., etc. Let's actually get into your tarot. We're going on for time a little bit. Suitable for such a meandering reading, or a reading about meandering. I've gone on for about an hour, so I do apologise for that. The colours want to come in, which is interesting now that we've had that pause. But what do I want to say first? Okay, so to elaborate on this situation beyond like maybe projecting onto this person or feeling that you've held someone back or shoved them in a different direction, we've got a 3 of Wands and a 3 of Swords going on. So there is a heartbreak here, which again I think links back to this in this perfect twin-like motion. I would suspect that the first circumstance which made you feel very off-kilter here or started to influence your directions was a heartbreak or was something particularly heartbreaking. And you'll notice as well that this person is in like a biker outfit, right? And they've got their visor cracked, so they can't see where they're going anymore because of the heartbreak they've endured, because of the sword through the heart that's traditional for the card. But they would have been moving at high speed. So there's something here about like what we've said about moving at speed is correct for the person. Maybe you are someone who inspires by how motivated and high momentum you are, in the same way that my friend was. But there's also something about maybe something coming in from the outside of that process which broke your heart and made it difficult to see where you were going. So you were still moving with a speed that was natural to you, you know, read going from place to place or group to group or whatever, in a way that is actually part of who you are, maybe even part of your astrological makeup, but doing so in a way that is partially blinded, right? That is kind of seeing through the cracks. And again, we spoke about the shattered mirror versus the clear mirror in that Snow Queen / Never Ending Story sense. And we've got more shattered imagery here as well. So there is the echo of that, of like piecing together what the trajectory might be without full sight. And you believing that that's because of a problem in the person that you are. Whereas actually the cards are saying that's a problem that was brought about by these circumstances that you lived through, that were extraneous to your journey, that were kind of karmic and this will happen, rather than something that you created through your own actions and your own relationships. So if you have been feeling criticised, even by the self, note that the only thing kind of stopping you from seeing clearly so far has not been the way you move, but the things that have moved in on you that you could not have controlled even if you tried. The Three of Wands sometimes speaks about that control, or about setting things off and kind of trusting in the momentum of them without necessarily knowing where it is that they will go, right? And also about being grounded to a place in order to let things transpire that are less grounded. So think outsourcing projects, delegating, that kind of stuff, if that's relevant. But there is that sense of like watching on, partly with anticipation and partly with horror, at what might happen next when you can't see the full picture because of what you've endured. My sense is, if you're seeing this, you have enough distance from those circumstances to fully evaluate them with a less emotional, knife through the heart kind of a feeling. But that in doing so, you may still feel a lack of control, which is kind of what this reading is addressing. It's not saying we have complete control, right? Because that's kind of impossible. What it is saying is that not all of this has been about you. Not all of it has been about the way you've moved. Not everybody else's decisions have been about the way you affected them and projected onto them, or about some kind of influence you have on the overall web, the overall network of people you've been around. Some stuff is just lifing. Some stuff happens to you. And if you're a particularly adaptive person and you move through the world in this inspirational way, full of things blossoming out of what was once destroyed, then you may go through that particular mode of being, not realizing when problems happen to you that they are not your problem, as in you didn't make them, right? Okay, Devil reversed. I feel also drawn to turn to the book for this, so let's see what we've got. Just one sec. Normally we speak about kind of breaking addictions or bondage, including to certain patterns of thought with the Devil reversed. So this may be you kind of breaking out of self-blame to do with the past, and maybe viewing yourself in the way that you project that other people are viewing you. But there's more to it, so let's have a look. So detachment, freeing oneself and awareness. When you return, and you will return, I'll have these restraints bound even tighter. Okay, back at the beginning I said about the interruption of the interruption and how there may be looping involved in this reading. This is kind of future stuff if this is present and past, right? And this is almost a caution to say, when you do that retracing of steps, or if you choose to loop back on a place or a set of people, or even one particular person, as a result of examining all of this and realizing the extent to which you had a part in it versus the extent to which it was just life, in retracing steps to one particular influence, you might find that influence sees you as more adventurous, more spontaneous than they are, and tries to tighten the bolts, tighten the snares, kind of strap you into where they are in order to stay with you, right? Because we've got this Lovers influencing it, and also in reverse. It's only like a side note. It's not a main component of the reading. I think honestly the big work to be done here is reassessing how you came to be where you are and the extent to which that's a good or a bad thing. But if you do kind of go backwards in your determination to move forwards and through, be careful that other people with perhaps more fixed ideas, perhaps more tied up with, in particular, the material and sexual worlds, that they don't try to tie you to them as well, right? That they don't try to say, oh yes, I think it's very good that you've been doing all this work, and by the by, I'm sure you've come to my conclusion, which is this, and I want to use that to manipulate or ensnare you in a particular way, and that can range from out and out abuse to just being particularly seductive, right? But you do you probably know who this person is, but I would be wary of being pulled back into whatever it is that they habitually do in your repetitions, because you are not made in a habitual way. If I'm addressing you as the sun person here, you're kind of not meant to be in one place doing one thing. And I think that's something you may have learned and then kind of turned the sword on in an unconscious way, is that if you do live habitually, and if you do live cyclically, and if you do the traditional thing, you become not just very unhappy, but a bit useless. It's better for you to keep this momentum that you've been keeping. Whereas I feel that there is someone in your life that works very differently from that might be more traditional, that might be more tied to vices from your past, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of it. And that wants to keep you in their loop or in the habit of doing things their way, when actually you are more of a fluid being, and can do this person a lot more good by being fluid around them and by saying, that's wonderful for a time, but I'm off on my way now. Let's keep in touch, right? Judgment in reverse. This is kind of, ironically, well, let's take it with this guy actually, because this Agent of Arms is appropriate too. This being the, is it the Page of Swords in this one? Yeah. So there is a calling that's been denied here, vocationally, right? I'm not saying it's you, but I'm saying that considering that you had all of this going on and that you were going through all of these aftershocks, dealing with people who saw things differently, perhaps getting pulled back into cycles that weren't so great for you, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if underneath all of that, in what you see as colourless, there actually was a bit of an overarching purpose, or at least a thematic resonance with all the places you've been and the people you've been, right? That was denied even to the self, not because it was not true or not fully formed, but because it conflicted with what everybody else wanted, or saw as normal, right? If we are taking this as the Page, and I'm going to say that just for now because I can't remember the order of this in this particular deck, and it feels correct. The Page of Swords can be to do with observing what other people are doing, spying, keeping up with the Joneses, maybe stalking in a sort of light way. And this can be to do with comparison via those means. And if it's in conjunction with a denied vocational opportunity or a denied pattern for the self, this can be somebody who has a lifelong habit of looking at what everybody else sees as the way to do things and imitating it in order to gain access to those people, right? Which again, that can be very Gemini as well. And that's not shade on Gemini. It's just like there is the core self and then there is the adaptive self for Gemini, and that's why they are so charming. And if I do say so myself, people with Venus in Gemini tend to be quite charming and also tend to be seen by the outside world as quite fickle, because we are enamored with things in a temporary way while we adapt to the next stage. That's not to say we're not capable of long-term commitment, but it's to say that we are creatures of mood and of phase, and we have little obsessions along the way. And I think perhaps that's the way that you've moved through the universe as well. And that in having these temporary attractions to different pathways or people, as I said at the beginning, you've kind of emulated what it is that they would want for you, believing those things in the moment to be correct, to be logical, to be a good thought to have, right? But that actually that has shouted louder or projected harder than an undercurrent through all of your movements, through all of your friendships, relationships, familial dynamics, and places you've lived and embodied and been, that is cohesive. There is something under this which is genuinely, I want to say it's more sorted out than the people around you that you believe to be sorted. It's like you totally do have a clue the direction you're moving in. If you didn't, you couldn't move so fast. But I think that maybe for you, because it's quite an instinctive thing, you consider it to be like not a skill you consciously have. and therefore it doesn't exist, right? This makes me think of somebody I know who may even be watching. Hello, love you if you are. Who is very analytically minded, very gifted in kind of sciencey and engineering fields and ways, who consumes a lot of that kind of fiction that's very technical and analytical and hard, and can think his way out of any particular problem, including social ones, and express his thought process in a highly articulate manner. But at his core, he's very strongly Pisces and a very intuitive being, and kind of flows in and out of things whilst developing that very egg-headed rationale for why he's doing what he's doing, that he can explain to everybody in his life who all have very different concerns, very different directions they're pulling him in this devil sense, you know, be they traditionalism or sexuality or long-term relationships or money over here or recreational activity, you know. Like, to all of those people, this figure can be the charming Gemini and say, well, I've thought about this a lot, and I'm sure that you will appreciate in particular that this is where I've come to with this. And each of those individual groups or sets will go, ah, yes, that is very thought out, and it's very personalised to me. But actually, having observed this person for many years, at the undercurrent of their decisions seems to be an emotional and intuitive pull. There is an underlying theme, which may not even be obvious to that person, that is the true trajectory, the true, you know, bike they're riding through this kind of city of potential intellectualizations and or indulgences. The thing pulling them along is actually intuitive. It's actually towards this vocational or spiritual sense of where it is that they should be. And I think that if you were to come to that particular person, or indeed to you, and say, I see that you made that decision entirely on intuition, and that it was a bit last minute and haphazard, and that you kind of pulled into a thing there by forces stronger than your own will, they would say, well, that's bollocks. I can rationalise to you in, you know, half a sentence why it was best for me to make this move. Because they're so used to kind of explaining to themselves to erase this intuitive part of the self in order to please the people around them. Excuse me, hiccups, confirmation. I hope that makes a kind of sense, right? I think maybe the pressure of that is intensified for someone who also feels that they don't necessarily have a fixed identity to other people, because it's almost like each decision you make then, when you're not set in who you are, other people find that difficult or find it confrontational in the way we spoke about. And they're like, well, I demand to know why it is that you're doing what you're doing, because it's not what I would have done. And then you get very good at responding to that demand to know, at responding to these repetitious, very fixed things kind of pulling you back in. But actually, you do know where you're going, and you can be logical about it, or you can be intuitive about it. And if you stand back, there is a theme. Notice that this figure has these electrical kind of bat wings. Bat is a Plutonic symbol. It's about rebirth, resurrection, transformation, in the same way that all of this stuff was. It also speaks to goth culture, if that resonated again. But the fact that its wings is very air-based, and judgment is not a card of intellect and logic. It's a card of almost religious experience pulling you in a certain direction. It's the call of Gabriel's trumpet, right? It's the true will kind of a thing moving through you. And yet it's expressing in this articulate way. And it's almost to me as if the different bone fragments making up these like scapular wings of this bat of wires as well, this bat of energy, of electricity, of understanding the social web. All of these different spokes are kind of for a different set of people who think that a different direction should have been where you turned. But when you view them objectively at a distance, you see the theme is actually you and your flight and your ambient movement through the skies with great ease, right? And the ability to transform the bat energy of the Hanged Man into something which has momentum, which is soaring through the air. it takes you to stand back from what all of these different sources are seeing as correct, for you to notice that there has been a theme, that there has been a vocation, that there has been a pattern of movement, which may even have been informed by this Plutonic transition, right? It may be that without this big, horrible cosmic thing that potentially made you a lot more like staccato in your movements, you might not have come to as sure a sense of what it is that flows through all of this. But just as by the end of the novel, we get a sense of what this guy's colour and purpose is within the friendship group that have eventually abandoned him, so by the end of your reading, we get a sense that there is a broader theme throughout every tiny micro movement that you've made, even the ones you did in fear, even the ones you did in avoidance. Because in moving away from certain things, you clarified that those are the things that you never want, right? And in moving towards certain things, perhaps even for the wrong reasons, you've clarified the kinds of things that fire you up. All of these, when you take that retrograde movement back through all of the cycles since this Pluto moment, are telling you who you are. And it is a very definitive, concrete, nuanced, complex, but nonetheless fixed picture. It is an identity fully formed, even if you've been told in the past by yourself or others that you didn't have a true identity. So before we get into your petals, let's look to a guiding colour. It may not be your colour, but it's something to work with, right? And it may be that it reminds you of a particular time and place, I'm told, that is on one of these twists and turns that you've had, on one of these temporary trajectories that you are on. What will remind you of a significant place to start this process, to think through these things, is a red tone. Okay, so red is the first thing we see. So red in this sense might be the first time period that you thought about. It might be the first person that came to mind because I've put it under this guy. It's an immediacy. It's the most pressing theme or problem or issue. And the fact that it's a tone is grounding it into urbanity, into reality, into day-to-day stuff. Particularly where you addressed whatever this red theme is, whatever is most pertinent to you, within a city environment, partly because of this cityscape and partly because tone. That's going to be the time period that we can look at first to say, actually, that is where the theme was clearest. That is where these things pulling on me made the most sense. That is also where I projected the hardest onto somebody else, that I was influencing their decisions when perhaps I wasn't. That is where the groundwork was done for this new project that's about to flower. It was where my motivation inspired other people, even as I myself felt uninspired, maybe, you know, in a sort of post-catastrophe depression type way, right? Because red is also the blood moving through the veins, the beating of the heart, and to ground it in a tone to make it a more muted colour speaks to taking that energy back to the baseline, back to the first thing that can be done. Red also speaks to energy, so there may be something here if you are differently abled, either cognitively or physically, about getting back to your baseline point of energy, about doing the least you can within a week and seeing how you feel and then building up from that point. Again, Pace Yourself by Amy Arthur may be really relevant, and I've recommended it before. But this red thing is just generally back to basics, back to the sound of your own heart, back to the fact that blood is pumping through your veins, back indeed to the present moment and to what feels the most pressing within it. If there's not a theme that you're immediately honing in on, or a time that seems less complex than another time so that you can go back to that and think, oh, it's that thing, then this red might simply be the act of sitting in your own body, perhaps in an urban environment or one that makes you feel muted and calm because tone. A grey space, if you like, a sort of grounding environment. and just listening to your own breathing, listening to your own heartbeat, listening to the sounds around you, and just thinking about the colour red and letting stuff come to you in this intuitive way that it does until this starts to crystallise, right? In this acknowledgement that I maybe don't spend as much present day time in the things that I've achieved as I could, part of my process has been to switch off sounds for a few days, be they notification noises, YouTubers that I normally watch, no film, no TV, no audiobooks because I usually binge on that stuff, no Creepcast, which is the real shock from this end, and to just listen to what the environment is offering instead. That's actually why we don't have a playlist on today, right? And we probably will the next time round. But there is a requirement here with this red to get back to basics. For some it may relate to ancestry, but I feel that's a slightly different nuance of red. This really is like, who are you at the most fundamental level, right? How does your body feel? How does your mind feel? Who are your friends at the moment? Not who you'd like them to be, but who are they? What's your bank account looking like, right? Where are you living and where are you going to be living? All these kind of very baseline things. Paint a picture and then you can say, I am satisfied or dissatisfied with this part of the picture. But really the first thing that comes from this is attend to urgency by being in your environment, by sitting with yourself, by going, what was my Pluto? What were my aftershock points? Where was I true to myself and where was I split in my decisions? Where was I traveling with great intuitive momentum in what was perhaps an overarching theme of how I like to travel? And where was I blinded by either the way that other people go about things or by the crisis in the moment that hurt my heart, right? And from that, the universe is about to get us pregnant. The universe is about to give you an offering, a new thing that comes organically from you, right? Because it's a natural process that's been mentioned, but has the potential to go beyond anything that you've offered thus far. We're speaking about legacy here. We've come from a very self-chastising place, a place of not feeling we really had a colour or identity or purpose, a place of feeling that we've held other people back with our indecision. And we've eventually flowed by this red tone through all of the events of the past and the present into a spot where actually we're ready to give birth to something new. Right. You can choose to leave me behind at this point if that is more than sufficient. Please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly if that is you and you want to part ways at this stage. But if you'd like to stick around just for a little clarification via a rose petal reading, we're going to do that as well. And I'm told that that will be particularly pertinent to those for whom this has been a kind of a love reading with this Gemini type figure, or with some of the people influencing and influenced by your actions thus far. So, the first thing I'm noticing is that we talked about purple earlier, and these petals, despite the light changes, are kind of purple meets mauve with a little bit of white. Now, white is purity, emergence, the new, the kind of birth of this brand new thing that we want to be working on. And then purple speaks to that plutonic that we just spoke about. And the kind of hinterland between them is almost like a blending of the two energies, often into a colour that signifies healing because it's coming up as a kind of lavender, right? It's funny because I was toying with whether to put these semi-dead flowers out or whether actually to get my lavender plant on the table today. So this is our substitute lavender. There may be something in there if you are a healer or a magician about sympathetic magic, about using something that is like a thing if you can't source the original plant or element or whatever. But just more generally speaking, for those of all different disciplines, this is about Pluto. It's about growing something new from something dead, and it's about healing and renewal of the self through potentially spirituality or spiritual examination. So extremely fitting colours to come through today. This is the only completely white petal here, so I'm going to take this as the core. And it's interesting that it's come almost to the centre of what I consider to be a circle that I read in when I do these. So when I think of the circle and the compass and all that sort of stuff, I mean, I do come from ceremonial and from tradecraft and all the rest of it, but I also think a lot of like Turtle Island, medicine wheel type stuff, particularly the Sundance school, which I was with for a little bit of time in my early 20s before my own plutonic stuff happened, right? And they have their elements, they have their elemental correspondences, they have animals positioned around the wheel, different aspects of the psyche around the wheel, in much the same way as in other global traditions. But the closer something is to the centre of the wheel, the more it is seen as a catalysing agent, something that moves between all of the significant points, but is itself the momentum of the wheel. Again, we're coming to that theme of the core of a person, the colour of a soul. For some of you, I'm getting that colour is white, right? And this is not just, excuse me, the confirmation. Sorry if you had a bit of a shock there. I think I accidentally tapped the mic when I was hiccuping, but hiccups are my yes, go forward sign. So white speaks to purity, right? I mean, there's lots of connotations of white. Many of them are negative. Many of them are whitewashing. There's some nasty racial stuff going on with it. There's a lot of cultures that signify death with white, which again speaks to Pluto and letting go of the old. But there's also a blankness to white, which is kind of freshness, blossoming, newness. We think of spring animals with their fluffy white coats. We think of white birds as symbols of peace and renewal and covenant even. The white animal, I think, is significant for you. I don't know which animal in particular. I'm just hearing white animal from spirit. So there's something here if you do work with like dove or lamb, or I'm hearing white cats, Arctic foxes. There's something about a white animal which will tell you more in the examining of it about what your core personality, your core colour actually is, what your core mission is. But also to white, there's not just this like blossoming and innocence and all these kind of very William Blake childlike imagery kind of things, or like Aslan, right? The white lion kind of stuff from C.S. Lewis, and Jesus flowing through that sort of energy. There's also the blank page, the blank slate, the beginning again. Blank slate may be a relevant song for some of you. I think that if you identify with the tarot portion of kind of moving in all these different directions, never really settling on something or settling down or being a person in a particular industry or whatever, that there is something about the freshness that you bring to each of your projects that is part of your purpose, both for the people already entrenched in that particular discipline or set of friends or place or whatever, and for anybody who's kind of as new to it as you are, that they can see that having a fresh pair of eyes is a really positive thing to that as well, right? There's something in you that's very full card, very new, wherever you go. And I think, again, you may have seen that as a limitation, a restriction, I want to even say like character defect, although I don't agree with that at all. But you've seen it as a negative, right? Because it's like, I'm always new. And now I'm hearing the song I'm New Here from Smog, which is definitely relevant. I'll link it down below. But that newness is in fact part of what you bring to each environment, because when we were speaking about living in the present tense, you come in, whether or not you're familiar with a set of people or whatever, like it's like the doors blow open and all this fresh air rushes in, all this wind from outside, and the entire place goes silent because everybody knew how they were operating before you. And then it's like you come in like whoosh, and everything's different. There's suddenly the context of what the outside is like. There's suddenly like how they may look to a fresh pair of eyes wandering in with a completely different perspective, which again may be demonstrated by your appearance for some of you. there's just like a new energy that you impart wherever you go. For some of you, I'm hearing you're not actually based in a place. You're a very international worker or speaker, or you have a partner who is very international and you move from zone to zone, perhaps to sort of maintain that relationship with them, or perhaps because it's something you enjoy as well. But each place you go, you bring newness with you in a really beautiful way. And actually going back, I don't want to get too wishy-washy or too biblical with anybody, but going back to that mention of the lamb and the lion and Christ consciousness and C.S. Lewis, there is that quality to Jesus, right? Of just walking about from place to place, saying all these incredibly profound things, until before you know it, there's like a conga line behind him of disciples who are somehow now like irrevocably connected with a divine consciousness from just having met some dude. Now, I'm not saying you're Jesus, obviously. Please don't get a messiah complex as a result of viewing this channel. But what I am saying is that if you've had a particularly negative view of yourself because you're always going from place to place and sort of accumulating people and then changing your mind again, know that some of the figures who did that in terms of myth were figures like Jesus, were figures like the Buddha, right? These wandering, catalyzing people who brought change to whatever sphere they were in. And that may be part of your clue if you're wanting to know sort of vocationally where you should be. You know, even if you're in a very technical industry or anything like that, there is a sense that you come in and that the discipline is rendered almost alien by your presence, that there is a new way of understanding it from the fact that you've seen it in a different fashion. And I think that if you're looking to this reading for like career advice or study advice, look to something where you can be that ingenious presence, that inventor, that full energy for other people. And you can go from spot to spot and say, have you thought about it this way? And watch people kind of, you know, watch their eyes get wider and their jaws go slightly slack, going, no, but that's the answer to my question, right? It's not that you know the answers even. It's that you bring in the winds that give people the right way to go. And I know that sounds very, you know, abstract, wavy gravy, a bit hippy dippy, but it's like you are the catalyzing presence for things to happen around you that think in a new way. And again, like to use a more grounded example, nothing like Jesus, but somebody who wasn't in the who wasn't deep in the trenches of the technical work necessarily, but who had this kind of energy, would be like your Steve Jobs, right? Of just kind of coming into a team saying, these are the things we're doing, these are the ways we're not going to think that we've thought prior, get to it. And having that presence be a catalyst for, excuse me, more hiccups, for incredible teams of people very gifted in their fields to say, yeah, I get it. Now that we can't do that and we can't work this way and we must have this by this time in this particular fashion, I suddenly understand how we're going to do it. Or I can invent how we're going to do it. So you might be like a consultant or even like a transient tutor, you know, like for a particular module or something like that, that just gets people thinking in that almost a more philosophical fashion about a discipline that they were very comfortable within. And if this isn't like a career reading, and if this is instead about relationships, then I think that each connection you come to, maybe you have a problem with like people sort of latching on to you because you completely subvert what people expected that they could be around each time you show up, right? There might be a lot of people who think you're the love of their life or who think that you like change their friendship group so irrevocably that they can all never be friends again and it's your fault or whatever. But it's because you're coming in with that new energy each time that makes other people new, right? It helps other people to realize what it is that they truly wanted. And it helps them to see something that they didn't expect, which interestingly is not just a function of the catalyzer, but is a core function of Pluto. So part of this thing about a plutonic event, whether or not it was a transit, might be that you have strong plutonic energy, but in a way that you can sort of transcend into that Uranian energy of the Fool and put into, hey, have you thought about things this way? Because we're not going to be able to do things the way we used to do them. That's dead. That's Pluto crashing through it, right? I think of Pluto sometimes as like the rolling boulder that Indiana Jones is like dashing away from, right? It's like anything that's in that thing's path is not going to function the way that it was going to before. But by being that destructive force, it kind of makes a new channel that people can then walk down safely afterwards. I think part of that is your cosmic function. And it's something to be embraced and to be proud of. Not something to be like, oh, I'm this destructive, plutonic, horrible thing, and I come and devastate people's lives, and they're so attached to me, or they're so enemies with me, or, you know, I go from job to job or place to place or whatever. That's not the way to view it. The way to view it is, you might be a rolling boulder that carries a bit of destruction, but you're bashing through stuff that needed bashing through. You're carving out new ways of going about the stuff that everybody thought was routine. Because you're not routine. You may work very well in routines in a temporary way. You may function very highly, right? Because we've got all of this very technical, articulate, engineering kind of energy. But you also crash through what was expected. And of course that's going to rub people up in the wrong way. Of course that's going to make the more traditional of those people out there a little bit harumphed. And you might even, in terms of your own karmic contracts, have been placed into a family that was more traditional, or been placed around partners who want very specific things that you don't actually want for yourself, or been placed with friends that have set ways of relating to people and doing things and think that anything else is cringe, right? But you're there to transcend the cringe. You're there to travel beyond what is traditional into what can reflect the values of that tradition within a new paradigm. You're there to break open and break apart the hearts of the people that you encounter in this very innocent way. And I actually, hit me up in the comments if you're a subscriber that I haven't chatted to or anything like that, because I want to know you. You sound amazing. I'm sort of a bit in love with you, but, you know, sadly contracted to another. Okay. It's interesting as well that this arrives so close to the MC in the kind of zodiacal wheel that I tend to hover over my readings. It's almost like this is reinforcing this idea that, no, you do have a purpose. You do have a job here. And we shouldn't conflate the MC with career necessarily. It's very much vocation. It's highest purpose. It's what do you embody in this life that helps people out the most, or that is the biggest thing for, well, everything. for God, the earth, and everything in between, right? All 7 layers of reality, and undead, mighty dead, living, etc., you know. So there is this thing of you are very close to purpose right now. You are overlapping with the sense of who it is that you needed to be. But I think maybe what's been dragging you down is the questions of how that relates to your past, because this is icy. This is how you grew up, who your family were, who your siblings were, kind of what your friends think of you, because there's a lot going on around here in the 11th, how it might affect your shared resources and very intimate relationships, because this is the 8th, right? The things that are absent from this are like your personal identity, how it is that you want to expand, because this is like the Jupiter house, and how it is that you choose day to day to live and to be intimate with other people that you choose, that you care about. not through a sexual pull, but through that kind of contractual counterpart energy. There's a lot like going on here, but it seems to be going on with family, with friendships, with career, and with like shared stuff, or with sexuality and kind of tribalistic versions of identity, rather than how am I going to learn? How am I going to grow? Who am I going to grow with on a one-on-one kind of ultimate level? And take that even if you are poly, by the way, because that can be, you know, an anchor partner or a dog or whatever. And how am I going to incorporate this in a very day-to-day, very sort of systematic fashion that is not too routine for me to function in, right? Okay, out of the astrological, what else do I need to know here? I'm hearing you shall go to the ball, because this looks to me like those cupcake dolls that used to have really big dresses. So there is like, if you've been wondering whether you can attend an upcoming thing, whether you can be with a particular person, whether you will in fact make it in a certain career that you have settled on after all this ambiguity, you shall go to the ball, right? But there may also be, because of that phrasing, a kind of fairy godmother energy coming through of a mentor, I want to say a femme mentor, if not a female mentor, that helps you just add the little bit of extra magical sprinkle to this trajectory. That, I'm not tooting my own horn here, but that might even be a tarot reader or a particular person you work with in a spiritual sense, whether it be me or someone else. But there's like this, I feel like the dream is the wish your heart made, right? You've got that. You're starting to see why it was that you had to be around the ugly stepsisters and the unfortunately stereotypically evil stepmother. You're understanding the obstacles in your path. You're making allies with the mice, etc. And the final bit is to go bigger and ask spirit to add some magic, and then to have this godmother figure come in and sort of sprinkle a bit of fairy dust on what remains for you, so that you can go forward and go to the ball. For some of you, just going back to the astrological layout, this might be a person you consider a counterpart energy, particularly if you're attracted to women or femmes. There might be somebody coming in for you, I would say pretty imminently, because this is corresponding with cups, so it's a matter of months, right? Who is able to just add that extra bit of sparkle onto the stuff you've already decided about your life, about yourself, from the time when you see this reading to the time that you get into some kind of collaboration with that person. Also, for some of you, just because of what that image came from and those cupcake dolls, this person may smell like, bear with me, they may smell like 90s doll foreheads, and or vanilla, and or synthetic strawberry. Do with that what you will, right? Confirmation in the comments if that sounds like someone you do already know. And again, if you're if you're attracted to men who are kind of very masculine and wouldn't smell like that, or wouldn't be a fairy godmother in that way, just adapt as you see fit. But there is this sense of counterpart energy, not rescuing you, because it's not that sort of dynamic, but maybe taking what it is that you've learned and grown with and become, and adding a bit of extra sparkle to it, just giving it that finishing touch of magic so that you can step into your purpose, align with your MC, and go to the ball, right? I'm also seeing somebody stood here like a figure where the white petal is their head, and you can see this is kind of like almost like it reminds me of like a bionicle or a robot body or something, but it's also like made up of lots of different petals, almost as if it's a bit rock biter as well, with the Never Ending Story references. I know at least one of you will respond to that. Hello, lovely. But it's almost as if, like, in putting together all the different bits of this reading that may have hit, or putting together all the parts of your past that are relevant now, you've kind of formed yourself into this gradual man. And this person that is armoured as well, because I'm seeing this as a kind of shoulder plate jobby. So it's like you've not only figured out who you are, but you're coming to a place where you can defend your identity against the imposition of other people's idea of who you should be, or the identity's influx of other people that at one time in your life you might have been tempted to follow suit with, or to imitate a little bit to find your feet, right? Remember, that was at the beginning of the reading, this kind of Gemini emulation in order to charm other people and in order to try on new things and new possibilities and keep the variety in your life. I think that stuff is falling away a little bit for you, and that instead you're building from all the different selves that you have been and producing one coherent human. And you'll notice with this Plutonic heart, right, with this deep, beating, passionate place inside of you that knows what it is that you're doing, that shall go to the ball. This as well is a deep purple, which is literally the colour of passion, right? When you're doing not all colour magic, but colour magic in sort of newer disciplines like Wicca, you will take a colour like pink, and the more purple there is in it, the more passion is in a love relationship. Or if you're doing a purpley blue, the more purple you add, the more passionate that descent into self, or the more emphatic that protection spell, etc. Purple is added to things historically, not just to connote royalty, and I do sense that sovereignty with you, but also to indicate that this is a very emphatic place to be, that you are sure now, that you have an idea of where it is that you are going, or indeed that you are in concordance with a higher spiritual good. And the base of that petal is falling at the solar plexus chakra of this particular individual. So it's like it's flowering out of confidence in yourself, hopefully some of which is spurred on by bits of this reading, and developing into the idea of where it is that your heart is taking you. And I think that is towards not a true purpose, because I think you've always been moving towards your true purpose, but a more cohesive and more emphatic and easily translatable version of purpose, which you can defend, which you can protect, and which you can use in the grand scheme of things to heal, fortify, and inspire others. If this was useful to you, please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. I'm a small channel with a big mission. I'm not very well known. I've been doing in-person readings for years, and I'd like to transfer to doing more online work. So the best way that you can enable me to do that is to either book with me or to share this channel far and wide and contribute to the algo. Let me know in the comments, right, more about this journey, because I am fascinated, and I think it'll hit in different ways for a lot of different people. But I do hope it goes well. I hope that you enjoy every single second of the present moment whilst all of this kind of stuff is coming together. And I hope that you now view yourself as an enriching individual and not as a misguided or confused one. Because the impression that I get from this reading is of someone that I would very much like to hang out with and know. Take care.